I could tell that Sheila was taken aback by my unexpected reaction when she mentioned wanting a divorce. It was clear that she had rehearsed this moment, practicing a demeanor that exuded a mix of firmness and victimhood, likely in front of a mirror. As she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded delicately, it felt more like a funeral than a declaration. The theatrical sigh she let out before uttering the words, "I think we should get a divorce," made it apparent that she considered this a daunting task. However, my response seemed to catch her off guard. I smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was a slow, contented, almost relieved smile. The kind that graces the face of someone who has finally exhaled after holding their breath for too long. Sheila's confident facade faltered as my smile lingered. She had braced herself for anger, resistance, or even grief, but my indifference was what threw her off balance. With a simple "okay," I leaned back in my chair, her eyes narrowing in response. I nodded, a weight lifted off my shoulders for the first time in years. She blinked, clearly taken aback. "You don't want to discuss it? Do we need to?" And then I noticed it. A fleeting glimpse of uncertainty, of regret in her eyes. No, not yet, but it was close. Over the past months, she had become distant, avoiding me, prioritizing late work nights and outings with unfamiliar friends. She may have thought I was oblivious, but I saw everything. The subtle changes in her demeanor, her sudden focus on appearance when she went out, but not at home with me, the way she lit up at her phone, but hardly glanced my way. I didn't feel the need to talk because I already understood the situation. Sheila had found someone else, and she believed she was trading up. That's why she expected resistance, following the typical script where the husband pleads and begs while the wife feigns sorrow but revels in the power play. As her husband fell apart, I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I rose from my seat, stretched my arms, and let out a contented sigh. "This is actually good news, Sheila," I remarked. I was starting to wonder how long we could keep up the charade. Sheila's mouth opened slightly, but no words escaped. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. I offered her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before making my way to the fridge for a beer. "So, should we divide our belongings now or save it for the weekend?" I inquired nonchalantly. Sheila hesitated to respond, likely thrown off by the unexpected turn of events. Little did she know this was just the beginning. While she thought she was leaving me behind, she was oblivious to the fact that she was about to lose everything. Sheila remained silent, her carefully prepared plan crumbling before her eyes. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she scrambled to make sense of my unanticipated reaction. She had meticulously crafted a script that was now falling apart in real time. "I need this divorce like a chess move, assuming I'd fall apart the moment," she declared, checkmate. What she hadn't realized was that I had already left the game long before she made her move. I took a sip of my beer and casually leaned against the kitchen counter watching her. So I prompted, raising an eyebrow. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Then finally, she managed to recover. "I think it would be best if I handle the paperwork first," she said, regaining some of her confidence. "We don't need to rush through this." Translation: she had more things to arrange before she fully cut me off, probably with her mystery man. "Sure," I said, nodding. "Take your time." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. She had expected resistance, anger, maybe even an argument, but all she got was calm acceptance. It was already messing with her, and that was just the beginning. That night, I started laying out my own plans. If Sheila thought she had control of this situation, she was about to get the wake-up call of her life. I made some phone calls, and my lawyer, an old friend who owed me a favor, was more than willing to assist. I provided all the necessary documentation, including bank statements, property deeds, and some additional information that Sheila didn't think I knew. Upon reviewing our joint accounts, I discovered some suspicious transactions. Money had been withdrawn and funds mysteriously disappearing without any valid explanation. Sheila had been planning for this situation for months, but what she didn't realize was that I had been doing the same. Acting quickly over the next few days, I ensured all essential assets were transferred under my name, while Sheila was occupied spending time away from home. She thought she was in control, but she had underestimated me. To subtly hint at my knowledge and actions, I casually brought up the topic of relocation during breakfast one morning. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I nonchalantly asked Sheila if she had already chosen a new place. Surprised, Sheila, still in her silk robe, questioned my assumption. Sipping my coffee, I explained that I assumed she wouldn't be seeking a divorce if she didn't have a plan in place. Leave yourself without a place to go, right? She hesitated. I was thinking of staying here until everything is finalized. There it is. She expected to stay in the house I paid for, while I moved out like some kind of unwanted guest. I smiled. That's not going to work for me. Her eyes narrowed. What I mean? You asked for a divorce, I said with a shrug. It's only fair that you figure out where to go from here. I wouldn't want to be in your way. Her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. That's not how this works, Daniel. Actually, I said, tilting my head. It is. I could see it then, that first real crack in her confidence. For the first time, she was realizing that maybe, just maybe, she had miscalculated. And I wasn't done yet. The day after Sheila dropped her little divorce bomb, I noticed something interesting. She was getting nervous. Not the kind of nerves that come from regret, but the kind that creep in when someone realizes they don't have as much control as they thought. She was still trying to. She acted like she had the upper hand, carrying herself with that same cool, distant confidence. But I could see it. The slight hesitation in her voice, the way she kept checking her phone, more than usual the way she avoided my eyes when I spoke to her. She had assumed I'd be the one panicking, that I'd be the one scrambling to figure out what to do next. But instead, I was moving forward, smiling, living my life as if she had just done me a favor. And that was starting to mess with her. The real shift happened a few days later. I came home earlier than usual from work, wanting to get some things in order. Sheila wasn't expecting me, which was clear from the way her face froze when she saw me walk through the door. She was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, mid-conversation. The second I stepped in, she went silent. Hey, I greeted casually, tossing my keys onto the table. She forced a smile. Hey, you're home early. Yeah, figured I'd take the afternoon to start packing some of my stuff. I glanced at her phone. Who were you talking to? As she conversed with her fingers wrapped around the device, I asked, just a friend. She nodded in response. Must be a good friend if you stopped talking the moment I walked in, I remarked. She tensed at my observation. Brushing it off, I casually replied, it's nothing, Daniel. However, my curiosity wasn't satisfied. Later that night, when Sheila was asleep, I decided to investigate further. Despite her changing the password on her phone, her laptop remained accessible. Seated at the kitchen table, I delved into her emails and messages, uncovering my suspicions. It was confirmed. Sheila wasn't just planning to leave me, but for someone named Matt, whom she had been seeing for nearly a year. The realization didn't evoke anger or hurt. Rather, it stirred amusement within me. Sheila thought she was cleverly executing her escape plan while I remained clueless. But in reality, she had underestimated me. In reality, Sheila was the one who was deceived, because Matt was not just an ordinary guy. He was broke. As I scrolled through their messages, I noticed all the subtle hints she had overlooked. His requests for financial help with bills, car payments, and investments that required her money. Sheila had left a man who had built a life for her, for someone who was only going to take advantage of her financially. That realization inspired me to take action. The next morning, I prepared breakfast as if nothing had changed. Pancakes, bacon, coffee, creating a sense of normalcy. When Sheila entered the room, she hesitated, clearly surprised. Wow, she muttered. The food, what's this? I replied with a smile, just thought I'd do something nice before the divorce and all. As Sheila sat down, I joined her at the table, pouring myself a cup of coffee. So I was thinking about what you said about the divorce, I began. Her eyes lit up slightly, and she replied, oh yeah. I nodded. I think you're right. We should end things quickly, no need to drag it out, right? She smiled as she sipped her coffee. Exactly, I said, leaning back. So I'll have my lawyer expedite everything. I'll sign over my fair share, and you can move on with your new life. Her smile wavered for a moment. Clearly, she hadn't expected this turn of events. She hadn't anticipated any of it. But I wasn't finished yet. Sheila believed she was on the winning side. She thought she had all her plans set in motion, that her new life was within reach. She had convinced herself that she was making a wise decision by leaving her stable, predictable husband for a more exciting opportunity. Little did she know that she had walked right into a trap, one of her own making. Over the next few days, I meticulously played the role of the ideal soon-to-be ex-husband. I remained composed, agreeable, and even supportive. I assured her that I understood her decision, that her happiness was important to me, and that I wanted to swiftly wrap things up for both our sakes. And she fell for it completely. The real challenge came when she initiated a conversation about dividing our assets. As she began outlining her thoughts carefully, I was silently strategizing, ready to take the next step in our intricate game. "It might be best if I stay in the house at least for a while," I said with a smile. "Oh, for sure, I get it," she replied, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good, I mean, it just makes sense," I agreed, nodding. "Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense." She let out a small breath of relief, thinking she had the upper hand. Then, leaning forward, I added just one thing, still smiling. Her forehead creased in confusion. "What?" Taking a sip of my coffee, I watched as the realization dawned on her. "The house, Sheila, it's not ours. It's mine." She chuckled nervously. "What are you talking about?" Setting my cup down, I explained how I had the deed transferred solely to my name during the refinancing last year. "So technically you're a guest here?" I tilted my head. Her face paled in disbelief. "That's not possible." "Oh, what it is," I clarified. "And that means when the divorce is finalized, you'll need to find somewhere else to stay." The room fell silent as she processed the revelation, realizing I wasn't the fool she had thought I was. "I had assumed I was finally going to get half of everything in the divorce," Sheila scoffed, shaking her head. "You're being ridiculous." But I grinned and replied, "No, you won't." That's when I revealed the real bomb. I reached into my pocket and slid a folded document across the table to Sheila, whose hand trembled as she picked it up. "We signed this when we got married, remember?" I reminded her, trying to keep my voice light. "The document stated that what's mine stays mine, including the house and my savings." As Sheila processed this information, I leaned back, observing the realization sinking in. I reminded her that since she was the one who filed for divorce, the court wouldn't look favorably upon any request she made. Sheila looked up at me, her mouth slightly open, as if she was at a loss for words. "You really thought you were going to walk away with half of everything?" I asked, shaking my head. "You really thought I was that naive?" Sheila's face displayed a mix of shock, disbelief, and fear. As she struggled to respond, I stood up and stretched. I shrugged. "Why not?" I raised an eyebrow. "You can't just throw me out like this." She pushed back her chair, standing up fast. "I need time," she stammered. "I need to figure things out," I smiled. "Should have thought about that before you started dating a guy who can't even afford his own apartment." Her jaw tightened. That was it, the final confirmation. She had really thrown away everything for a guy who couldn't even support himself. I walked past her, heading toward the door. "You have a month, Sheila," I said over my shoulder. "After that, you're on your own." I didn't wait for her response, because for the first time in years, I was the one walking away. The shift in Sheila was instant. For months, maybe even years, she had carried herself like she was the queen of this house, like she was the one in charge. Initially in control, she was taken aback when she discovered she wouldn't be receiving half of my assets in the divorce. As the reality of the situation sank in, her composed facade began to crack. Over the next few days, she desperately tried to maintain her aloof demeanor, but the truth in her eyes revealed her inner turmoil. Unprepared for being blindsided, she descended into chaos. Her attempts to provoke unnecessary conflicts betrayed her unraveling state. One evening, as I savored a dinner of steak, roasted vegetables, and red wine, she barged into the kitchen, clearly unsettled. She snapped at me. "You yourself?" I continued to cut into my steak, unaffected by her tone. "Yeah, I was hungry," she remarked, crossing her arms. "You never used to cook when we were together." I nonchalantly chewed, swallowed, and shrugged. "Maybe I didn't feel like it back then," I retorted. "Wow, real mature, Daniel," she jabbed, taking another bite. I clenched my fists, saying, "You're the one yelling over a steak, Sheila." She accused. "You're just enjoying this, aren't you?" I paused, setting my fork down and wiping my mouth. "Enjoying what, this?" She motioned around the kitchen. Watching me struggle, watching me, I tilted my head. "Watching me what?" She hesitated. It suddenly dawned on me that she was struggling. I had assumed she would move in with Matt right away, but her behavior indicated otherwise. She was still here, trying to maintain power in the house. It was clear that things weren't going as smoothly as she expected. Matt hadn't allowed her to move in, leaving her with nowhere to go. I leaned back in my chair, holding back a smirk. "Is something wrong, Sheila?" I inquired, to which she shot me a glare. "Screw you," she retorted before storming out. I sat there calmly sipping my wine and relishing the moment. The following day, I decided to take things a step further. I had been contemplating decorating the house for some time, but now it felt personal. I spent the morning boxing up Sheila's belongings, her clothes, makeup, and the various decorative candles she liked to display in each room. By the time she returned home that evening, the house already had a noticeably different look. Sheila stood frozen in the doorway, her gaze fixed on the stacks of boxes near the entrance. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. I simply smiled. "Just getting a head start," I replied. Sheila's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again as she struggled to find words. "You can't just pack up my stuff," she protested. I shrugged indifferently. "It's not your stuff anymore. You said you wanted it out, remember?" Infuriated, she marched over, forcefully opening one of the boxes. "This is ridiculous. I still live here," she argued. Leaning against the wall with arms crossed, I maintained my resolve. "Actually, you don't," I stated bluntly. Sheila's eyes shot up to meet mine. "Excuse me," she snapped, awaiting my response. I glanced at my phone for a moment before facing her directly with a firm but calm tone. "You were never listed on the lease, Sheila," I explained as I showed her the document. "Legally, you're just a guest now that we're no longer married." Sheila's expression drained of color as she processed the situation. It was the first time she found herself without control or options. "You're not serious," she stammered, but I put my phone away and set a deadline for her to find a new place. Sheila's fists clenched in frustration as she protested being thrown out. I shrugged, uncertain of what else to say. I suggested she could stay with Matt for the time being, which elicited a strong reaction from her. In that moment, it became clear to me that her decision to leave our stable life for something different was not turning out as expected. Now she was facing the consequences of her choices. Sheila's world was falling apart, and it was evident in her demeanor as cracks in her once perfect composure began to show. Her usual control and manipulation tactics were failing her, leaving her unsure of how to navigate the situation. She resorted to various tactics, including passive aggression, insincere apologies, and even attempted seduction, though it came off as more pitiful than humorous. I remained composed and indifferent, which only seemed to further fuel her unraveling. The tipping point came when a text from Matt interrupted our dinner. I casually observed as Sheila tensed up, her grip tightening on the fork and her entire demeanor shifting. I reclined in my chair, enjoying my steak, as she hesitated before reaching for her phone. Her face turned ashen as she looked at the screen. "Is everything okay?" I asked casually, taking the sip of my wine. She forced a tight smile and replied, "No, just something I need to deal with." Abruptly, she stood up and took her phone with her as she exited the room. I waited for a few moments before following her. In the living room, she paced back and forth, her phone clutched tightly to her ear. "What do you mean?" she hissed into the phone. "You promised." "No, Matt, we discussed this. I assured you everything would be ready." "No, you can't just." She paused, then let out a frustrated sigh before tossing her phone onto the couch. Sensing an opportunity, I approached her. "That didn't sound good," I remarked. She spun around, her eyes full of fury. "Were you eavesdropping on me?" I couldn't help but smirk. "Hard not to when you're practically shouting," I teased. She exhaled sharply and ran a hand through her hair. "It's nothing really," she insisted. Tilting my head, I prodded further, "Because it sounded like Matt just left you hanging." Her jaw clenched and I chuckled, shaking my head. "Wow, he really left you high and dry, didn't he? Guess that whole new life plan of yours." "Mine didn't pan out as expected," she snapped at Daniel. "No, really," I said, feigning concern. "What's your backup plan now?" Sheila's uneasy silence made me realize she didn't have one. She had been so arrogant, thinking she had it all figured out. Now, standing lost and alone, she had only herself to blame. The next day, I took action. While she was out searching for a new place to live, I changed the locks. It was legal. I owned the house, she wasn't on the lease, and she had filed for divorce. I had no obligation to let her in. When she returned, she found herself locked out. I reclined on the couch and patiently waited. It didn't take long for the banging to commence. "Daniel," she yelled from outside. "Daniel, open this door." I leisurely sipped my drink before ultimately getting up to open the door just a crack to peer at her. She appeared flushed, her eyes filled with intensity. "What have you done?" she demanded. I smirked in response. I simply thought since you're leaving soon anyhow, there was no need to keep the outdated locks. Her fists clenched at her sides. You can't do this. I casually leaned against the doorframe. I can and I affirmed. She gazed at me, breathing heavily. Then her expression softened. Daniel, please. I have nowhere else to go. I raised an eyebrow. Not my concern, Sheila. A look of desperation crossed her face as she searched for an escape. Can we just talk, please? I let the silence linger before replying no. With that, I shut the door in her face the moment she realized she had lost everything. I didn't bother to check the peephole. I could hear her outside. Her breathing could be heard through the door, quick and frantic, resembling that of a cornered animal sensing impending danger. Sheila had always been proficient at masking her true feelings behind a facade of composure, but in this moment she was coming undone. I paused, counting the seconds. 5, 10. Then a gentle rapping. Knock, knock, knock. This knock was different, devoid of the previous rage, instead conveying an air of desperation and restraint. Daniel, her voice trembled now, barely audible. Please, can we talk? I exhaled deeply, my hand hesitating on the doorknob. In days past, perhaps even weeks, I might have relented, allowing her to re-enter, her persuasive words taking hold. But not anymore, not after everything that had transpired. I made a decision and walked away. The following morning, as I ventured outside to retrieve the mail, I half anticipated Sheila to be huddled on the doorstep. Yet she was absent. In her place, a crumpled note wedged between the door and the frame caught my eye. Daniel, I need to speak with you for just 5 minutes. Please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake and I need something from you. This is typical Sheila behavior. I chose not to respond as I had already devoted too much time and energy to her. She had created this situation and now had to face the consequences. Yet a part of me was still curious about her whereabouts. A few hours passed and I found my answer while sitting in my car at a red light. I saw Sheila outside a cafe, looking disheveled and distressed as she gazed at her phone. Her appearance was a far cry from the polished and composed woman she used to be. To my surprise, she was not alone. Matt was with her, looking visibly upset. I kept my distance, observing as they engaged in a heated argument. Sheila was pleading fervently, while Matt stood there sternly, eventually turning and walking away. Sheila was left with no more options. Despite the situation, I refrained from intervening and drove away, leaving her in the cold. After a moment of standing frozen, her hands clenched into fists. Slowly, she turned her head and looked around like a lost child in a crowded mall. Her eyes landed on me, and for a brief moment neither of us moved. Then cautiously she began walking towards my car. It was clear from her face. The regret, the desperation, the realization of losing everything. I rolled down the window. Something wrong? I asked. She swallowed hard. Daniel, I raised a hand. No, she blinked. What? I know what you're about to do, I interrupted. You're about to apologize, tell me you made a mistake, that you were confused, that you didn't know what you were doing. And then you'll ask for help. Sheila's eyes flickered. But here's the thing, I continued, I don't care. She gasped sharply. I gave you everything, I reminded her. A life, a home, security. And you threw it all away because you thought you could do better. Her lips trembled. Blood dripped from my finger. I wasn't thinking, I admitted with a smirk. Sheila gazed at me, her expression displaying her realization that I was done with her games. She began to speak but stopped, finding herself speechless for the first time. Without looking back, I drove away, leaving her behind. There was no sense of victory, only a peaceful contentment that filled me. I had spent years giving while she only took, but now I was free. Days passed and Sheila attempted to contact me multiple times, but I ignored her calls, texts, and emails. She soon realized that the door to reconciliation was firmly closed. Then one evening I received a call. Came through from an unknown number. Initially hesitant to answer, a gut feeling compelled me to pick up the phone regardless. Reading the silence on the other end, a familiar voice broke through. Daniel. It was her, Sheila. Releasing a heavy sigh, I inquired, what do you want, Sheila? There was a noticeable pause, her tone softer than I had ever heard before. She eventually confessed, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I reclined in my chair, allowing her words to linger in the atmosphere. For what? I prompted. Sheila admitted, for everything. for taking you for granted, for believing I could walk away and have it all fall into place." Though I remained silent, she continued disclosing her losses and hardships. Despite her circumstances, I found myself numb to her plight, having exhausted compassion and moved beyond the hurt. Resolute, she whispered, "I know I can't erase the past. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to express it. I needed you to comprehend that I now grasp the gravity of my actions." Pausing briefly, I responded, "Okay." She waited, hoping for another chance or a hint of vulnerability, but I had no more to offer. She had made her decisions, and now she had to face the consequences. "Goodbye, Sheila," I said calmly. After a soft sigh, the line went silent. As I set the phone down, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. And with that, I took a step forward, leaving the past behind for good.